So as EU-India 1.5 track conference, which was organized to combat online extremism or to check the study or progress of that, I'm joined here by the EU Ambassador to India, Mr. Herb Delphin, and we'll try to speak to him about the key takeaways from this conference and how both the parties will try to tackle this threat which is growing over a period of time. Thanks, Mr. Delphin, for joining NDTV. First of all, your first assessment of this two-day conference on tracking online extremism.
Thank you for having me. First is, I think every participant view was that this conference was very much needed. I think everyone here, all the experts and officials that we gathered over these 2 days, all agree that fighting terrorism contents online is one of the new battlefront in the global fight against terrorism. So I think bringing the top-notch experts from Europe, from India and the region to discuss, to compare notes and understand what are the different challenges we face, I think was already a key element. But we went further than that. We look at what can we do about it. So we look at how we can develop critical thinking and develop our digital literacy to be able to prevent the setting up of narratives, the setting up of ideology in a surreptitious way through the internet that basically indoctrinate or basically spread hatred or that trying to even recruit terrorists online. So that was very important. How we also up our game in terms of the different tools we can mobilize through AI, through algorithm, how we can better cooperate at the international level. So just a few examples of what we covered as ground over these 2 days. And I think, as you mentioned, it was a 1.5 track, which is a technical word to describe it. You bring together officials and experts, from the academia, from expert think tanks and all those. So it was not a deliberation between governments, but a deliberation between experts and officials. But it is important because that will help precisely policymakers to better inform and develop our policies. And I was really heartened to see that after 2 days, everybody praised that. So what it means also for EU-India, it means that our cooperation in homeland security, in countering terrorism, because we have already platforms for that, we will bring it to a new level. So I think we are on a good track here after these 2 days to really up our game, I would say, in our tools and means and to address terrorism online, because clearly the political will and the motivation is here.
Okay, so what has been the observation and findings, general observation and findings, since experts from across the world, perhaps EU and India, both sat together to see that how these extremists are sort of co-opting or say using these platforms to recruit people or to propagate their material? So what has been those observations?
I mean, the evidence is here that they are being used, that online and offline services are being used for recruitment, for spreading of ideologies, and sometimes in ways that one would not think about, like using, for example, a gaming platform. How do you distinguish between, people who are, let's say, playing the game and sometimes, and using language that could be understood as part of the game, but there may be a second level where actually it is a way for terrorists to hide, but at the same time finding space on the internet to exchange. So how we, I would say, weed them out, how we detect and how we weed this out. So in the EU, for example, since 2021, we have very robust legislation on taking terrorist content online offline. So if whenever we detect it, there is a mandatory obligation on online service providers to take this content out of their platforms. But so how we compare notes about our legislation, how we compare notes on how we can detect those weak signals to basically prevent from spreading narrative, recruitment to turning to action, committing terrorist acts. So this is this gray zone that we also need to address, not just to prevent the act when it's going to happen, but upstream. And I think that was one of the key element of these conversations, how we can act more upstream.
So more of a preemptive steps before.
Exactly.
Also, you are aware that global conflict is rising, like let's say what is happening in Middle East or what is happening in Europe, like Ukraine-Russia thing is also going on. And many experts believe that these conflicts also lead to radicalization. These conflicts also lead to people who take up arms and then it spreads. How relevant is this to stop these conflicts to ensure that it doesn't propagate or fuel this kind of extremism in future?
Well, I think, unfortunately and sadly we have conflict, as you mentioned, in the Middle East and elsewhere, and it has proven to be a fertile ground for terrorists. I mean, myself, I've been involved very much in the dealing with the humanitarian consequences of the conflict in Syria, and we could see how terrorist groups have been sort of using this context to ISIL, and also as in Iraq, to propagate their hatred or their own agenda. The purpose of these 2 days was, I would say, not addressing conflict, but addressing, I would say, the use of our online systems to further their aims, to further their objectives. And I think that's, as I said, it's one of the battlefronts. So you've got virtual battlefront and you've got real battlefronts. So this is a virtual, at the same time, very real, because this is, as I said, part of the early phase for these terrorist groups to develop their activities. So, and it goes, as I said, from recruitment, from spreading ideologies, but also financing systems through the net. So this is important, how we can disable that. That is also not preventing completely terrorism, but at least constraining the space for terrorism.
Okay, my last question, any word of advice, a piece of suggestion for the Indian government, as we know that we have got hostile neighbor towards Bangladesh, towards Pakistan, and we see the kind of extremism being fueled into these regions. So any word of caution or advice for the Indian government?
I don't think I have any word of advice to provide to the Indian government, which is very well on top of its policies and in its action to counter terrorism. What I can say for sure is that in our bilateral relations, what I can observe is that in the past years, the counterterrorism agenda has grown and expanded, homeland security, and it is turning into a very promising stream of collaboration. And we had workshops on how we counter the use of commercial drones for terrorist purposes. Today it was about, and yesterday was about, countering online terrorism. So there are different facets. So we have an established counterterrorism dialogue. But these sort of events show that it's not just about talk. It's really how we look and zoom in on concrete dimension and concrete aspect of terrorism, how we can cooperate. So I'm confident that through such platforms, we can really help building better understanding of each other's challenges, whether in Europe, in addressing terrorism, or here in India or in the sub-regions, because we had also representatives from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Maldives, but and how we can work together. And I think that was also the purpose of such events, is also how we can then bring forward our common objective of tackling terrorism.
Okay, thanks for speaking to us, and perhaps a joint effort is needed in the subcontinent region to tackle extremism or terrorism or activities online. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.